thinking.
Next week I gotta leave about 7:45. You have to be done. Heck, yeah. I'm good with that.
Well, it's on, huh?
That tonight.
Welcome, everyone, to North Ogden City Council. We're happy to have you visit and attend with us this evening. We'll begin our meeting. First of all, I would say mute your phones if you haven't already done that, so it doesn't cause any disturbance during our meeting. I'd like to excuse Councilman Severin. He's out of town this evening. Welcome those who are newly elected to office. And we'll begin our meeting with invocation, Pledge of Allegiance by Council Member Barker.
Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this opportunity to gather this night as members of the City Council, the mayor, staff, and public. We're grateful for the opportunity that we can discuss upcoming items and that we can listen to each other and try to make this city a better place. Please bless that we'll be led by thy guidance and that we'll be able to take everyone's interest into consideration, and bless us that we'll keep the civility here. And these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Everyone will rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Give a special welcome this evening to our new police officer, Robert Rhodes, who's joined our staff here in North Ogden. And it's a pleasure to welcome him, and he'll be sworn in this evening by our city recorder, Annette Spenlove. Happy to have his family with us as well.
You just stand right there. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties
and I will discharge the duties
of my office with fidelity.
with my office with fidelity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, you have a pen on you. Let's have you sign or print your name here, date, and sign it there.
Print.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's your certificate.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Officer Rhodes. Appreciate your family joining this evening as well.
I did. Chief got some too. They let the youth city council in. Downstairs is locked apparently.
See ya.
I don't either. You don't see the sheriff?
I don't see,
I don't either. Skip it and come back to it if he comes. Might have thought 6:30.
The next item on the agenda is a presentation by Weber County Sheriff Ryan Arbonne. I don't see him here at this point in time, so we'll delay that until he arrives. The next item is a consent agenda, discussion or action to consider minutes of the City Council October 1st, October 8th, and October 22nd. I want to entertain a motion from the council regarding those items.
Mayor, I'll move we approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Councilman Turner to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
A second by Councilwoman Stoker. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Meeting is open for public comment.
Hi, my name is Jenny Taylor, and I live at 123 West, 3100 North in North Ogden. Tonight, I'm here representing the group Follow the Flag, North Ogden. We just finished taking down the Field of Honor out front. We just took down the flag flying the canyon today, and just wanted to thank the City Council, especially Parks and Rec with Tiffany Staley, and Public Works with Dave Espinoza for the support. The program we had last Sunday was attended by hundreds of residents from our city and surrounding communities. We've had a lot of comments from people just saying how touching it was to come together as Americans, as community members, to see the flags honoring our military members. And we know that wouldn't be possible without the cooperation and partnership of the city. And also just wanted to thank you for letting us set the flags up out front. I think it's a stirring reminder to see. We had veterans, many in their 70s and 80s coming. Their grandchildren had dedicated a flag to them. Or we had people who've served, maybe now they're in their 50s and 60s, and kind of felt like maybe nobody remembered they ever served, and they saw their name on a flag, and it's been just a touching 10 days. I know many of you have participated in many ways. We saw Cheryl up there today helping us take the flag down. Phil was up there helping us put it up, and probably many others of you. But anyway, just thank you from the Follow the Flag team. We're really excited about the great spirit of patriotism that is alive and well here, and just wanted to say thank you for the cooperation with the program last weekend and the different events throughout the week. And anyway, so that's all. Just thank you for being such a great community and working hard to make this a great place. We had people come from other communities and surrounding cities that made several comments that this is a great place to live. And we just smiled and nodded and said, yeah, it is. It's a great place to live. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. It has been a great week and a great feeling of patriotism as we witness the flags and what they represent. Thank you so much. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to the agenda. Consideration of amending the fiscal year 2020 budget. Presenter will be Eben Nelson, our Finance Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have some amendments to the fiscal year 2020 budget that we would like to propose. Staff report was included in your packet with an explanation of those. So the first proposal, the city receives donations throughout the year from a variety of sources. In the past, we've receipted donations into a donation revenue account, and then we've basically expected the department who's receiving the donation to find a place in their already approved budget to spend that money. And some of the donations we're starting to get are a little bit larger, and so it's having a more significant impact on those pre-approved expenditure budgets. And so in order to not have these donations have a negative impact on operations and projects in those departments, we're proposing that we approve a new donation revenue line and expenditure line for both the Parks Department and the Police Department. And so this would be $10,000 increase in revenue for both departments, and then $10,000 increase in expenditure for both departments. And the expenditure would be contingent upon receiving donations, so that they would have the freedom to spend the money in line with the purpose of the donation without impacting their operational budgets. So that's the idea on those. That's a total increase of budgeted revenues and budgeted expenditures in the general fund of $20,000. Any questions on that one? Okay. Then the other proposed amendment is related to a land purchase as part of our trail system, and this land is located at about 187 East, 1900 North. And so the city's been in conversations with the owner of that property, and the Parks Department would like to have this property as part of the city's trail system. So we're proposing $25,000 as the budget for that land purchase. $5,000 of that is proposed to come from the fund balance in the capital improvement fund. The remaining $20,000 is proposed to be moved over from the police building improvements expenditure line. When we approved the budget for fiscal year 2020, we had $30,000 in the budget for the feasibility study on the police building, and that project has been bid out and a contract awarded, and $10,000 seems to be a sufficient amount of money to have for that project. So we're proposing to shift the remaining $20,000 over for this land purchase for the trail system. Any questions on that one?
It's not really more of a concern I have. The police department really needs the money. Is there somewhere else we could get it, I know that our police, and I haven't talked to the chief, I just saw this today, I'm sorry, I've been out of town and didn't get on it. The police station's really outdated, and I know 20,000 is not a lot going towards a police station, but I'd rather keep everything with the police station, trying to get it updated as soon as possible instead of putting in a trail.
Sure.
That's my concern. But that's not really a question, it's a concern, so.
Any other questions?
Maybe I could explain a little bit about how these funds are related, so it might help you make a decision. But so the budget that we would use for the police station is in the capital improvement fund, which is the same fund where the trails would come from. So if we decide to use different money for the trail land purchase, it would most likely come out of fund balance in the same fund. So it may be a question of whether we want the land or not, and maybe that's what you're asking. So, but it is basically the same pot of money that would.
Right. Well, and I did say I did want to get the land, and I felt it was a good idea to pay the owner for the land. So, I guess yeah, if it's coming from the same fund, that actually alleviates some concerns. I just was worried we're pulling from the police department to put in a trail.
Okay, so I guess I don't necessarily know the time frame. I was thinking the feasibility study would probably be throughout this current fiscal year, and then once we get the results of that study back, then we would come up with a strategy and timetable for the actual, construction of the building.
And like I said, I know as we build a fire station, $20,000 isn't that much towards. It's a drop in the bucket for what a police station is going to cost. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true, but it is $20,000.
Right. It's still a lot of money, but
that's the capital improvement fund has a lot of draws, a lot of departments and projects. So it is a question of priority. What is the city council's priority for that money?
It's a motion.
Just to close it. To open it, you just open it.
Okay, thank you. Good reminder.
So those are the proposed amendments. If you're happy with the way they're presented, you can approve the ordinance that was included in the packet. If you would like to change any of the numbers, we can modify the ordinance before you adopt it.
Any questions from the council? We'd open up for public hearing on this particular item. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to
Move to close the public hearing.
move to close the public hearing by Councilman Swanson, second by Councilman Turner. Begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Was that just a motion to close the public hearing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, with discussion or action to consider the ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 budget. Any questions or discussion at that point?
What's the ordinance number?
2019-23.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve ordinance 2019-23, approving the amendment of fiscal year 2020 as discussed.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Swanson to approve the ordinance amending the fiscal 2020 budget, ordinance number 2019-23.
Second.
And second by Councilman Turner. Begin the voting with Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. The next item is discussion or action to consider the ordinance number 8. Discussion on the quarterly financial report for quarter ending September 30th, 2019. Presenter be Evan Nelson, our finance director.
You wouldn't want to skip the quarterly financial report.
We got a Reader's Digest version of this, or?
It actually got longer today as the time went by. I got a couple extra questions to... No, it shouldn't be too long. Okay, so this is the quarterly financial report for the quarter ending September 30th, 2019. And we've provided a staff report, a summary sheet, and then a detailed report showing all of the city funds. And so there's as much detail there as you'd like, but we'll do a summary version here. We always keep an eye on sales tax trends because that's an important revenue source, but it's also a good indicator of how things are in the economy. So our sales tax is looking good so far. We only have 2 months reported in the fiscal year. But with those 2 months reported, we are 26,000 ahead of projections, which is about 5.6%. This represents a 4.4 increase over the previous fiscal year. So our sales tax trend is looking pretty good. Looking at the second graph here, a comparison of revenues and expenditures, just some highlights from that. In the general fund, you can see that current expenditures exceed revenues. We have some major expenditures that occur at the beginning of the fiscal year. That's one explanation. Our liability insurance is one of those large expenses. And then we also have a delay in some of our revenues, such as property taxes, which mostly come in a little bit later in the fiscal year. If you look at the aquatic center, expenditures exceed revenues, basically due to the seasonal nature of our revenues in the aquatic center. Our transportation funds are continuing to accumulate revenues for future expenditure on the road projects that are coming up. In the capital improvement fund, we had several projects at the beginning of the fiscal year, and we expect revenues to offset those coming up, although a portion of those is paid for using fund balance. In the motor pool funds, we have a lot of vehicle purchases at the beginning of the fiscal year, so expenditures exceed revenues for the current time. There is a mistake on that middle graph. You see stormwater revenues showing about 45%. And I looked at that in the detail report, and it's actually about 18% is where the revenues are. So I made that correction. So that, and that's just slightly behind expenditures, but we expect that will even out as the fiscal year goes forward. The third graph is the general fund expenditures. Percent expended, and you can see there are a few departments that are a little bit over the fiscal year elapsed line, but this early in the fiscal year we don't get too worried about that. The non-departmental is where the liability insurance annual payment is recorded, so that one is higher than you might expect, but it'll come into line as the fiscal year progresses. We've provided fund balance information as part of the staff report, so you can review that information. I've also included the historical sales tax trend, so you can take a look at that. I wanted to provide a little bit of economic data, I guess, to just try to give you a feel for some things that are going on in the economy. The department managers at the city are tired of hearing me say that a recession is coming. They think I'm like the boy who cried wolf, and there may be some truth to that, but the signals are mixed, as you may have seen. But just to give you a few highlights, these are some statements from a Zions Bank economic report. The U.S. labor market added a better than expected 128,000 jobs in October. The unemployment rate rose modestly from 3.5% to 3.6%. The overall economy continues to moderate as gross domestic product declined from 2% in the second quarter to 1.9% in the third quarter. So we see some strength with the jobs report, but then we see that unemployment is increasing a little bit, and GDP is decreasing a little bit. So kind of some mixed signals. Related to the Utah market, it says Utah's labor market remains one of the best in the nation. In September, the state's year-over-year employment growth was the third highest of any state at 3%. The unemployment rate in Utah also declined from 2.8% to 2.7%, which is the lowest level since 2007. So Utah has a stronger economy, you could say, than the nation as a whole, which is a great thing for us here in North Ogden. I wanted to also give a bit of information from some financial surveys that I think is interesting. So Duke University has a CFO Global Business Outlook, and they do this quarterly survey where they gather information from CFOs across the country and I think across the world. And so just something to highlight from that. They said that 53% of the United States CFOs they surveyed believe that the U.S. will be in recession by the third quarter of 2020, and 67% believe that a recession will have begun by the end of 2020. So that's just kind of a bit about what people are saying and how they feel, which, you may put stock in that or not. Deloitte does a similar survey. Their report shows that 68% of CFOs rated current conditions as good, which is, the last report, it was 79%. So they saw a reduction in the number of CFOs saying conditions are good. And let's see, in the previous survey, 24% said they expected better conditions in 1 year. And this quarter was 15% expecting better conditions in 1 year. So that's some of the sentiment from CFOs around the country. Then this article from the New York Times. The message from Wall Street is clear. The American economy is not in the kind of trouble that investors feared earlier this year. Stocks are at all-time highs and climbing. Yields on long-term government bonds, which reflect expectations for growth and inflation, are also rising. Corporate bond spreads show that investors are more confident in the prospects for businesses. Then there's the yield curve, an indicator from the bond market that just a few months ago set off alarms about the risk of a recession. It has gone back to normal, and that signal has been met with relief in the markets. But as far as the economy is concerned, it might not matter. Once the yield curve has predicted a recession, one usually follows, even if that signal changes later. So anyway, for what it's worth, just wanted to share some of those so you can start to form your thoughts and opinions about how things are and will be as we get to have some budget discussions in the next couple months. I also had a question come up related to the city's bank accounts and FDIC insurance. So the city has a checking account at Wells Fargo Bank, and then we have a couple of savings accounts, one at Zions and one at America First Credit Union. Those accounts are insured through the FDIC up to $250,000. Our checking account typically has more than that because we need more than that in order to meet cash flow needs. The city maintains the bulk of its money in the Public Treasurer's Investment Fund, which is managed by the State Treasurer's Office. And that money is not insured, but it is invested in accordance with the Utah Money Management Act, which is regulation that basically requires only certain conservative types of investments. And so that's the approach that we've taken. We have the 3 accounts that have the $250,000 FDIC insurance, and then the PTIF. So I don't know if you have any comments about that, but that's been our current approach. We have been approached by some companies, one in particular, about the possibility of having a third-party company invest our money, who claim that they can, exceed the returns compared to PTIF, and in some cases they do. We haven't really presented that to the city council, but there are options outside of the PTIF where you allow your money to be tied up for longer periods of time. You basically give up some of your liquidity in order to try to get higher returns on the money. So there are different options out there, but as of right now, we just have those that I explained. So, any questions related to that?
Just from the email that the resident sent all of us, what would be the explanation for not breaking that Wells Fargo account up into several accounts so that they're all below the 250 insured rate? What's the benefit? What's the drawback?
If we were to do that, they would have to be separate accounts at different banks. So I think it's just kind of an efficiency of operations.
Sure.
The FDIC will insure up to $250,000 per account holder per bank. So even if you have multiple accounts at one bank, you still have the $250,000 limit.
Okay.
Evan, I won't be here, but I think it'd be good to have some type of, at the budget meeting, to talk about these funds a little bit, because this is the first time I've really heard much about it. It'd be nice to hear some of the other options that we could have.
As far as investing?
Yeah, in the next budget talks, I think it'd be interesting for the council to hear and stuff.
You could still be here.
I'm not gonna be here.
And
You can come visit.
No.
so council, just to also explain that, there are only there's a limited number of individuals or companies that are allowed to invest public funds in Utah, following that same Public Investment Management Act. And they have to follow very strict guidelines. There's only certain types of portfolios the city can buy. So it's not like we'd go out and start buying futures or shorting stocks or things like that. It'd be a very conservative investment strategy, similar to the PTIF fund.
It really is. The PTIF fund maintains, if you request money from PTIF, you get it within 1 day. So your money is very liquid there. But these other investment advisors will develop a strategy for, how soon you're going to need your cash, and then they'll lock it up in investments that have a higher rate of return, assuming that, you've guided them as to when your cash is going to be needed again. So you give up liquidity and then you get a higher rate of return is the idea. But it's an art too. They don't always beat the PTIF rate, but in many cases they do. It just depends. One other question that's come up quite a few times over the last couple months is related to the city's budget for the administrative transfers that we make from the enterprise funds into the general fund. We increased the amount of those transfers significantly in the fiscal year 2020 budget. And we've had a lot of questions about why we did that and what the numbers represent. So I wanted to share a little bit of information about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about employee salary and benefit expenses. First of all, we have quite a few employees in the city whose salary and benefit expenses should come from multiple funds. For example, administrative salaries, administrative employees serve general fund departments as well as water, sewer, storm, solid waste funds. So the expense for those employees should be shared across multiple funds. And we've used two different approaches to allocate those expenses in the past. One of the approaches was in our payroll system, the employee's salary would be automatically allocated and a portion of the expense would be sent to the individual funds when the payroll transactions were calculated. And so that's one approach that we have used in the past. The other approach that we've used is where in the budget we put those employees' wage and benefit expenses all in one place, but then we allocate the expense through a transfer where we bring money into the general fund to cover the fair share from the other funds. So we sort of had two systems going on, and in the 2020 budget we decided to consolidate that into one system. And so we moved a group of employees' wages and benefits into the general fund, and then we increased the transfer amount from the utility funds into the general fund so that they would pay their fair share of those administrative costs. For some numbers, we added approximately $388,000 worth of new employees to that allocation that wasn't there before. In addition to all of that I just explained, we also had a fair amount, about $150,000 in wage and benefit adjustments that came out of the salary study that was done, as well as the increase to retirement that we added to the budget in 2020. And then there was an additional amount of operational costs, about $110,000 that we added. We added to the allocation. And the operational costs in large part was we created a new department in the general fund. We called it Public Works. I think during the budget we may have also called it engineering. And we included the city engineer's costs there as well as the public works inspector because their expenses draw from multiple funds. So that was all brought into the general fund as well. And then on top of that, we reevaluated the percentages of employee salaries as to, what percent belongs in the water fund, what percent belongs in the general fund. So that's the explanation as to what we did. There's a lot of detail to it. So if you feel like you have more questions about that, we can share more information about it. But that's the general idea. And let me also just say that